We start this morning, though, with the news that former President Donald Trump has been found liable for sexually abusing and defaming the writer E. Jean Carroll.
He was not found liable for raping her. Trump was ordered to pay Carroll $5 million in damages after a jury took just 3 hours to reach its verdict. Carroll's court victory comes 4 years after she first made the allegation that Trump raped her in a department store dressing room in the mid-90s. It's an allegation that the former president has repeatedly denied. Here to break down the verdict and what it means for Trump's future is NBC News correspondent Ron Allen, along with NBC News legal analyst Kristen Gibbons-Fedden. Kristen, let's start with you. Help us understand the jury's verdict here, which was reached in about 3 hours. How do you think they came to this decision? And that figure of $5 million, how was that calculated?
Well, they found Trump liable. They really believed what Jeannie Carroll was saying, and they looked at the mountain of evidence and found liability. Now, as you pointed out, they did not find him liable for the rape. So there was obviously some deliberations around the insufficiency of the plaintiff's burden, that they did not find that there was penetration in the way that the judge had described it, but that there was forcible sexual contact made with Jean Carroll by Trump without her consent. Now, the jury, when they come up with an award such as $5 million, they consider several factors: her loss of income, the damage to her reputation. And in this case, the jury did make a finding for punitive damages. That means that they found that Trump's conduct with regard to the sex abuse as well as the defamation was willful and malicious and with conscious disregard for Jeannie Carroll. But I think as a civil litigator, I think that the most important part was they really considered the emotional distress and the psychological pain. So though we don't know what the jury actually used to devise this figure, I'd go ahead and bet that it's really the emotional distress and the psychological pain that she testified to experiencing.
Ron is on set here with us. Let's bring you in here, Ron. And I want to talk about some of the reaction. We'll pull up a statement released by E. Jean Carroll. It read, in part, "I filed this lawsuit against Donald Trump to clear my name and get my life back. Today, the world finally knows the truth." And then on the other side of this, in addition to releasing a statement through a campaign spokesperson, Donald Trump posted this statement on his Truth Social platform, where he continued to state that he did not know who Carroll is and called the verdict a disgrace. Ron, tell us more about both sides' reaction to this verdict.
Well, they both reacted in what they said on the witness stand or in court. E. Jean Carroll appeared for several days. It was a very emotional time, 2 days of cross-examination, which at times was very aggressive by former President Trump's attorneys. Former President Trump did not appear in person, but he appeared in the deposition that he did last fall, where he basically says he doesn't know her, this is a disgrace, it's a hoax, so on and so forth. But he also appeared in an Access Hollywood tape, which we've all seen. And E. Jean Carroll's attorney said basically that that was his confession to this particular allegation. Afterwards, Joe Tacopino, Trump's attorney, also reacted. Here's some of what he had to say.
He's firm in his belief, as many people are, that he cannot get a fair trial in New York City based on the jury pool. And I think one could argue that that's probably an accurate assessment based on what happened today.
Throughout cross-examination, Tacopino tried to tell the jury that E. Jean Carroll and her friends were politically motivated. They did not like Donald Trump, put it mildly, and that's what they said was their motivation. But obviously, the jury didn't buy it.
So, Kristen, obviously Trump's lawyer there plans to appeal this decision. What does that process look like when we're dealing with a civil case? What would be the arguments, the legal grounds here?
So they would probably petition or file a motion for turning the verdict over. In other words, asking the judge to step into the shoes of the jury and overturn that verdict. I can't imagine that will be granted. They'll then go to the higher courts. And I think some of the grounds that they'll probably raise will be the use of the deposition footage, because it was really damaging, and specifically the portions that were permitted by Judge Kaplan to be utilized. They may also seek other evidentiary findings that Judge Kaplan permitted, such as permission to allow those other women to testify about how Trump also sexually abused them. There was also the mistrial that was made, motion that was made in the middle of the trial. And so the denial of that mistrial and the grounds for that will also probably be the purpose of their appeal as well. And I think overall, Tacopino had said that the judge was treating him unfairly, and so they'll also look at that as well.
Ron, this is the first time that a former president has been found civilly liable of sexual misconduct, but he's not just a former president, he's a candidate again. We're getting any clues about what this means for the election?
Well, we'll see. It's not just this, and it is pretty monumental. We say this sort of matter-of-factly, a former president found liable for sexual assault, but that is pretty intense when you think about what's happened here. And but it's not just this case. There's a criminal case that Donald Trump faces in New York City. There's another civil case where he's accused of basically fraudulent business practices. There's the Georgia case involving tampering with the election, allegedly. There's the special prosecutors looking at January 6th. And the question is, over the coming weeks and months, whether the weight of that, all of that, will shift the political dynamic. I think people feel very strongly one way or another about former President Trump. And whether all of this moves the needle in one way or another will determine how 2024 plays out. And that remains to be seen.
All right, Ron Allen and Kristen Gibbons-Fedden, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you both. Well, this morning, embattled Republican Congressman George Santos is expected to appear in a New York courtroom to face federal charges. That is according to 4 sources familiar with the investigation. Santos has faced pressure to resign from Congress after he admitted to having lied about several parts of his background. For more, we're joined by NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian in Washington and NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin. Hello to you both. Thank you for joining us on this. So, Ken, I'll start with you. What do we know right now about these charges, and what can we expect in court today?
Good morning, Savannah. Well, the charges remain under seal, so we don't know the nature of them. Prosecutors aren't commenting. Santos's lawyer did not respond to our request for comment. We only know that he's been under investigation for some time over a host of matters ever since it emerged that he lied about his resume and biography, principally including the way he funded his campaign. There was a loan of a large sum of money, $700,000, a personal loan that he made to his campaign, and there have been questions about where that money came from. There also have been a host of extraneous allegations made against Santos, from sexual harassment to an accusation that he stole money from a homeless veteran that was intended for life-saving surgery for that veteran's dog. So a panoply of issues here. He's expected to appear in court today on Long Island in federal court, where he'll be processed, and we'll learn more about the charges.
So, Ken, amid multiple investigations, calls for his resignation from constituents, Santos actually announced his re-election campaign just last month, because it's already that time again. I mean, despite all that, put into context for us everything that's going on in terms of all these different investigations and what could potentially come out here, what consequences it could be, especially while he is a representative and announcing a re-election.
Right. Other state and local prosecutors have said they are looking into Santos, but it looks like they're going to have to get in line here if the feds are moving this quickly. And there's also a House Ethics Committee inquiry into Santos. If he's, we're looking way ahead here, but if he's convicted of a crime, that doesn't mean he's out of the House of Representatives. It takes a 2/3 vote to oust him. So he is facing a lot of headwinds, but as an elected representative, he has that in his pocket. Guys.
Julie, let's bring you in here. Tell us reaction from fellow members of Congress to this news.
Yeah, when do we ever find Republicans and Democrats on the same page about anything anymore? But in condemnation of George Santos, we do find Republicans and Democrats saying that he should resign. Take a listen to 2 of his fellow Republican lawmakers. One of them is actually a Republican in his freshman class that borders a neighboring district, and the other, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Watch.
There's a clock ticking, and George Santos should have resigned in December. He should have resigned in January. He should have resigned yesterday, and maybe he'll resign today. But sooner or later, honesty and justice will be delivered to him.
I think any time that the public's trust is violated in such a way is a profound betrayal of what we seek here to do, which is to serve the American people. But he will have his day in court.
I should note one member of New York Republicans, that's Elise Stefanik. She's a member of leadership. She's close to Speaker McCarthy. She has not said anything when it comes to Congressman George Santos. And Speaker McCarthy, by the way, also telling reporters he doesn't believe that he will do anything to force a vote to remove George Santos from Congress. Hakeem Jeffries, who's the top Democrat, also said at this point he's not planning to force that kind of vote. Some Democrats, including Congressman Dan Goldman of New York, said that Speaker McCarthy is refusing to make this move because he needs George Santos's vote. He's the key vote in many key items, including the debt limit fight right now, with Santos being that final vote for McCarthy to get his package across the finish line the other week.
Ken Delanian, thank you so much. And Julie, you are stuck with us for a little longer for our next segment. Hang with us. Thank you. Well, a tense meeting went down between President Biden and congressional leaders yesterday, and it did not result in any breakthrough in the ongoing debt ceiling standoff.
Democrats and Republicans are trying to reach a deal to avoid a potentially crippling economic impact. But the clock is ticking with just a few weeks left before the U.S. faces the possibility of defaulting on its debts. We are joined by NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli, who is here in New York. Julie Sirkin is with us again as well. Mike, let's start with you. There were no cameras in the room, but we're getting a feel for what it was like. Tense sounds like perhaps an understatement. Right. Did they make any progress at all?
Well, both sides were predicting ahead of the meeting that there wasn't likely to be a major breakthrough. And guess what? It didn't appear that there was a major breakthrough. Democrats making it clear they still want to see a so-called clean debt limit increase, no strings attached. Speaker McCarthy making it clear there needs to be some effort to rein in spending. Now, the president did talk to reporters after for quite a bit, and he made it clear who he thought the sticking point was. He said there was a good conversation among 3 of the 4 participants. He also laid out what the next plans are. Here, take a listen.
We need to take the threat of default off the table. As the meeting ended, excuse me, I suggested we continue to meet, and the leaders, our staffs continue to meet, and the leaders meet again on Friday to continue our discussions to see what progress we made.
Now, there's a real time crunch, as you know. June 1st is coming up quick, and the president has a pretty long trip planned. We're supposed to travel with him overseas to Japan and Australia next week. The president, interestingly, did not rule out the possibility that he might have to postpone that trip in order to make sure these negotiations move forward.
All right, Julie, let's bring you back in here. So this was House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's first face-to-face meeting with President Biden in months, and we know he's touted the GOP plan that passed through the House a few weeks ago, but it does include those deep spending cuts. How did McCarthy feel and say that the meeting went?
Well, you heard how Mike set it up there and what Biden said. He thought that 3 out of the 4 participants participated honestly in this meeting. Speaker McCarthy, following that, told reporters that he didn't think it went that great. They traded some jabs inside the meeting. McCarthy stood strong to his positions, demanding spending cuts before even negotiating a debt limit increase. It seemed like both sides in this meeting were pretty hamstrung in arguing their positions. Here's what Kevin McCarthy had to tell reporters afterward. Watch.
Everybody in this meeting reiterated the positions they were at. I didn't see any new movement. The president said the staff should get back together, but I was very clear with the president. We have now just 2 weeks to go.
Now, the meeting did grow tense in some key portions. There was a little bit of a back and forth whether Kevin McCarthy called the president a liar. He afterwards said he didn't. He said what the president was saying was a lie. That's when President Biden brought up what he says Republicans planned on 22% in cuts to veterans. McCarthy shot back. This is a key talking point that we've been hearing between both sides, and it's because the House Republican plan does not specify where they would cut, but it's clear that if they're not taking from veterans, that increases the amount they will have to cut from discretionary spending. So bottom line, as you heard Mike say there, no movement. Both sides will meet again on Friday. Staff are meeting in the interim, but the clock is ticking to that June 1st deadline.
So, Mike, I mean, looking back, we have seen the debt ceiling raised dozens of times under presidents, both Democrats and Republicans. Remind us what's at stake here if they don't reach an agreement.
And that's really what's motivating the president here, because he remembers this happened just 3 times under President Trump without this kind of drama. The White House has laid out all sorts of doomsday scenarios, potentially even 8 million jobs lost. The stock market could tank, and the government will have to decide what bills to pay. Some people might not see their Social Security benefits, for instance. So the president is putting this squarely on congressional Republicans. That's why I'm in New York, and that's why he's coming to New York. He's going to go to a district represented by a freshman Republican to really say it's up to them to do what past Congresses have done repeatedly. Do their duty, raise the debt ceiling.
Julie, as lawmakers try to find a way to avoid a default, of course, every vote is going to count. And there's some other news on Capitol Hill. Democrats getting one of those back with the return of California Senator Dianne Feinstein after a months-long absence because of health issues. Tell us the latest on her return.
After 3 months, Senator Dianne Feinstein, 89 years old, the oldest member of the Senate, is set to return today to cast her first vote potentially since February 16th. She's missed 90-plus votes. She is a key reason why judges are an issue right now. The only thing Senate Democrats can really act on in moving forward the president's nominees for judicial posts. But she's expected to return today after a health scare, after a battle with shingles. We heard some back and forth from Democrats and Republicans, primarily some Democrats, notably, who were questioning whether Senator Feinstein was coming back in the first place. Now she returned, we're hearing, overnight on a private plane from California, expected to make her first vote today. And of course, with Democrats' one-seat majority in the Senate, every single vote counts when it comes to the debt limit, although it's not clear if it will have any impact if Leader Schumer chooses to put a clean debt ceiling on the floor, because we do know 43 out of 49 Republicans currently oppose voting for anything like that.
Julie, thanks for covering so much for us this morning. Mike, great to have you in New York with us. Thank you both.
Now to the crisis at the border. Cities along the border are bracing for a surge in migrants after Title 42 is lifted at the end of the day tomorrow. The restrictions were first put in place during the pandemic to help stop the spread of COVID. Border officials have used the Trump-era policy to turn back migrants who are trying to enter the country.
But now with that policy about to be lifted, cities along the U.S.-Mexico border say their migrant shelters are already at capacity and they won't be able to handle the wave of migrants that is expected in the coming days. NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley joins us now from El Paso, Texas, with the latest there. Hi, Julia. Good morning. So El Paso had already declared a state of emergency. Actually, what are you seeing there ahead of Title 42's expiration?
Well, you can see some people here, these are mainly single adult men, sleeping on the street because they weren't able to get inside this shelter here, Sacred Heart Church, which is really the epicenter of where we're seeing that overcrowding in El Paso. You can see some people waking up this morning on the streets. There's really a kind of a makeshift camp that they formed here. And in El Paso, shelters like this say that they're still waiting for FEMA funding. That would be to be reimbursed through the county. Shelters like this are getting overcrowded. And then you also have detention centers that are being run by Border Patrol, where they're temporarily hold and process migrants. Those are also at capacity. And this is before Title 42 lifts. It'll be here at 9:59 local tomorrow night that more migrants are expected to come across, because now that those COVID-19 restrictions will lift, they'll be allowed to come here and claim asylum. Now, the Border Patrol is surging resources to this. We know DHS, ICE, everyone is surging as much money to this as possible. But what they can't get around, no matter how they change resources, change policies, is that it will simply take longer to process each migrant. When you can't quickly turn them back and you need to hear about their individual case, that means longer processing times, overcrowding, and potentially more migrants being released here on the streets. I will say, though, something has changed in El Paso just in the last 24 hours. Yesterday, DHS conducted what they called an enforcement action, handed out a flyer to people sleeping just like this along the streets, telling them to turn themselves in to be processed. Many of them had come in without ever talking to Border Patrol, but then after being processed, they could then possibly be released into the United States or sent back into Mexico or potentially deported. But it really cleared out a lot of these streets ahead of that expected surge.
Yeah, so Julia, I mean, as you know, we're already seeing a rise in migrants ahead of Title 42 being lifted. The shelters already over capacity. Now we expect more. What is the resource situation there like right now? How can they sustain operations?
Well, certainly the city is trying to do what they can. They're supposed to open another shelter today with more beds, but they say they still need money to be paid back from FEMA to them, because really this is a federal responsibility, immigration being a federal law, and it shouldn't be falling on their budgets, they say. And then you also have the federal resources. We know that the Biden administration just surged 1,500 active duty troops down to the border. Of course, they will be here in a supportive role. They won't be actually arresting or interacting with migrants, but they are supposed to basically free up more men and women from Border Patrol to go out and try to apprehend migrants as they expect this surge to come across. And in the long term, they're trying to set up more pathways for migrants to apply for asylum in their own countries rather than taking the risky step to come here. But again, it's hard to imagine how they get around the issues of overcrowding when more migrants come and it takes longer to figure out whether or not they have the right to stay here.
Julia, just quickly, we know the Biden administration had previously released a plan highlighting changes they're making at the border after Title 42's expiration. Walk us through some of the big parts of that.
That's right. So that includes expelling migrants more quickly, trying to get them rapidly through the process. It includes those troops we talked about. It includes ways that they will try to make migrants ineligible for asylum if they didn't claim asylum in a country on their way here, basically trying to raise the bar, show that the border is not open, and get more people here to handle this situation as a humanitarian crisis looms.
All right, Julia Ainsley at the border for us. Thank you so much.
Severe weather could bring flooding to parts of Texas today. For more on that, let's get a check on your Morning News Now weather.
Which means Angie Lastman is with us and tracking everything this morning. Hey, Angie.
Hey, guys, it's a soggy morning for Southeast Texas, and we're going to see multiple rounds of this heavy rain working through. We've already seen that in the past 24 hours, and there's more on the way. We've woken up to a whole lot of lightning associated with these thunderstorms that are kind of sitting right along that Gulf Coast in Texas. This is the area that we're going to look to for flooding concerns through the afternoon hours today, into the evening, and through Thursday. We'll keep this threat for at least through tomorrow, since we do have more rain on the way. Rainfall rates will be quite impressive, anywhere from 1 to 2 inches per hour. So no surprise if we see some of those creeks and streams dealing with some excessive runoff from all of this rain. It does include parts of Louisiana into parts of Texas. We do have the Houston metro area included into that. And we already know that they've had issues with flooding, not just in the past, but in the past 24 hours as well. When this is all said and done, really, we're going to see plenty of rain focused mainly across parts of Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana. One thing to note, Texas was dealing with a drought before this week started. So it'll be quite impressive to see how that drought plays out over the next week or so once this rain works through. But of course, when we're seeing localized amounts up to 3 to maybe 5 inches, that could be problematic for the flooding concerns. And that's exactly what we'll deal with in this area. Now, this is all part of a storm system that's going to continue moving its way across the country. As we get through the afternoon hours, we'll start to see some of these thunderstorms firing up in parts of the plains. That's where we're going to look for the severe weather through the day today. Then as we get into tomorrow, that'll shift a little farther to the east. Still parts of the plains, but a little farther out towards the east. Now, the southeast will see some of those showers and thunderstorms impacting folks through tomorrow. So that'll be something to watch, but it's not so much the severe weather that we'll see there. The storms will track into the Mississippi Valley by the time we get into the last day of our work week, but we'll still be dealing with heavy rain from Wyoming to the Dakotas. So kind of an unsettled forecast for us over the next couple of days. That severe threat for today, though, this is the area that we really want to watch. It goes from Rapid City, including Casper, North Platte, Scott City, and as far south as Texas. We'll see 5 million people at risk of, once again, guys, seeing this baseball-size hail. You can see the pinpoint of where it is. Denver is included in that. So if you live in the Denver area and far out east, you're going to notice that we'll have those thunderstorms this afternoon, but the biggest threat will be the hail. And stay on guard tomorrow, too, because 6 million people will be included in that severe threat into the afternoon and evening hours of Thursday. Once again, all the same kind of hazards, the hail, the wind, tornadoes, not quite as likely, but we could see a couple of those into the afternoon hours tomorrow as well.
All right. Thanks so much, Angie. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.